2nd edition Warhammer 40k. It's a big thing for me. I love painting the miniatures, and I love playing the game, despite its age. In this video, I'd like to suggest how you could start playing this relic of an edition in 2025 and beyond. I'm Matthew, this is Miniscape. Welcome! It's been some 32 years since the release of 2nd edition 40k, and around 27 years since it was discontinued. Despite this, games are still played from this edition, and people, including me, still collect and paint miniatures from that era. And this trend isn't really anything to do with my channel. In 2022, when I started looking into 2nd edition 40k again, there were already many online resources and communities engaging with the game. Facebook communities, YouTube channels, and blogs, for example. For me, nostalgia for this game has a massive pull on my heartstrings. It's the edition that got me into the hobby after all. It's also a wacky rule set, quite different from the more contemporary version of 40k in both style and mechanics. But my objective today is not to convince you to play this version of the rules. I'm not on a crusade by any means. However, if you are interested in trying this version from a bygone era, I'd like to offer a route into the game, if that's something that tickles your fancy. You see, the issue with 2nd edition is the availability and price of the resources required to play. Now, all editions of Warhammer 40k have their barriers to entry. New official miniatures aren't cheap, rulebooks must also be bought, along with a codex for your army, expansions if that varnishes your timber, and some dice. Of course, you also need a willing opponent, a playing surface, some terrain, time to build, paint, and research. Did I forget anything? Probably. 2nd edition needs all these things, but it works best if you also have the tokens, war gear cards, templates, vehicle datafax cards, specialized dice, psychic cards, and warp cards, just to name a few. And unlike the current edition, these are uncommon items. You may be tempted to pick up a starter box second-hand, but prices can be high, and finding all the components you need in one lot could be tricky. Thankfully, there are alternatives, and I want to share these with you. To begin with, I'm going to make a few assumptions. And that is that you are a wargamer of some experience, and you already possess a location to play, access to terrain, dice, a tape measure, you know, hobby essentials. I am not assuming you have a willing opponent though. The first thing to do is find someone who will play with you. Imagine you've bought all the resources and painted up your retro army, but you have no one to play with. I'd like to spare you that disappointment, which I also felt until recently. Okay, so you have a hobby buddy who's also up for the challenge. Great. There's still the issue of miniatures, of course. The dream for me was to build up a collection of retro miniatures to play with, and that dream has now been largely realised. But you could play with modern equivalents or proxies, while you're still trying the rules. I have more to say on the subject of miniatures later, but for now, let's just assume you can use some of what you already have. Just until you're sure this is indeed a rabbit hole you wish to fall in with carefree abandon. So, you're willing, and so is your opponent, and you have some minis to play with. What next? Rules, of course. Does that mean you have to try and acquire these second-hand? For me, that was the goal. Although, to be honest, I still had the rulebooks from the 90s. I wanted the original codices though, but you don't technically need them, or the original rulebook. Your absolute best go-to reference document is the Warhammer 40,000 2nd edition Battle Bible. There's a link in the description as to where you can find this. Shout out to Jason Payne and his helpers for putting this together. I'm not sure if the website it's hosted on is Jason's or someone else's though, so if it's your website, please do let me know so I can give you credit for making this resource available. Anyway, the Battle Bible has you covered for most things. Rulebook? Yes. Wargear book? Yes. Expanded rules from Dark Millennium? Oh yes. Codices? Absolutely. All the rules for every supported army are in here, even obscure ones such as Necrons and Legion of the Damned. Vehicle rules in 2nd edition were sometimes unhelpfully on datafax cards rather than in the paper codex. However, the vehicle rules are all in here too, along with the flavourful damage tables. War gear cards? Well, the cards aren't here, but the substance of them is. The same can be said for all the psychic powers and vehicle upgrade cards as well. That's a large chunk of what you need in a single free resource. However, if you're anything like me, I imagine you'll want the cards, templates and tokens as well. Some are merely optional, such as war gear cards and vehicle cards. You can manage without them, technically, but templates, psychic power cards and warp cards, you kinda need them if you want to play the game to its fullest. Let's start with templates. 2 of these templates you may already have in plastic form. You see, the Flamer template and the 1.5-inch Blast template have common plastic analogues released with many other Games Workshop games. For instance, I got some more of these when I bought the starter sets for Horus Heresy and Legions Imperialis in the last few years. But if you want the others, you'll have to print them off. Thankfully, there's another incredible website that has you covered, Project Anvil. In fact, this solves many of our other component issues, and again, everything is free to download. Massive thank you to Oscar for setting this up. Now let's have a proper look. The Get Started link is the place to go for all the downloads. I have put a link in the video description. The templates file has all the different sized Flamer and Blast templates required, even the cute little Thud gun markers. However, it doesn't have some of the psychic power templates, such as The Crunch and The Gate, both from Dark Millennium, but to be honest, you may be able to manage without these. And other psychic powers have the same size template as the Flamers and Blast markers anyway. Oh, and there's the vehicle movement template which is missing. It's not always needed, but you could estimate with a protractor. Maybe you can make your own template though. If you can think of a suitable alternative, please let me know in the comments. The other useful downloads are the War Gear cards, Psychic Power cards, Strategy cards, Vehicle Equipment cards, and Warp cards. All of the Vehicle Datafax cards are available as well. If you wanted to play 2nd edition with all the expansions, you'll want to print out the Psychic Power cards, the Strategy cards, and the Warp cards. If I was doing this myself, I'd probably print them on regular printer paper and put them in card sleeves, but I appreciate they could be professionally printed if so desired. It's especially important to have the Warp cards in a shuffleable deck, as well as the Strategy cards. If you open the Vehicle Datafax cards files, you'll notice these are remakes of the originals, and there are extra cards, fan-made ones for vehicles which didn't originally exist in this edition. I haven't compared any of them to the original cards, or to the Battle Bible, but there may be inconsistencies, just something to point out. As an aside, Project Anvil also has some useful cheat sheets to download, which may pique your interest. And moreover, this is an excellent blog to lose yourself in if you fancy some nostalgic reading. So between the Battle Bible and Project Anvil, that's most of what you need. The starter set came with a load of tokens, wound markers, Overwatch, Jam, broken markers, and markers to show the various vehicle speeds. These are useful, but I'm sure bits of paper could work in a pinch. How about dice? 2nd edition uses a few specialised dice. The Sustained Fire die, the Artillery die, and the Scatter die. The Scatter die is still produced by Games Workshop, and is shipped with the Horus Heresy and Legions Imperialis, for example. It also came with every edition before 8th, so there's quite a lot of these knocking around second-hand. The other 2 dice are more hard to come by, but I suppose you could always roll a d6 and substitute the values for other results, though not strictly needed. d4s, d10s, d12s, and d20s are also useful, but you could use an app for these if you don't have them. Before I move on to talking about the miniatures, I'd like to make the point that you don't need everything I have listed here for your first game, The game becomes much more manageable if you don't have psychers or vehicles, for instance. Of course, I think they make a game much more interesting, but you might want to leave them out until you've got the core mechanics sorted. Even when you do include them, you only need to print the psychic cards, war gear cards, vehicle cards for your faction, and to suit your collection. There's no point printing out the Imperial Guard Landspeeder datafacts if you're never going to use it. One thing I haven't mentioned is the mission cards. These came with the base game. These can also be downloaded from the Warhammer 40k 2nd Edition Facebook group in the files section. Shout out to Philip Prentice for remaking these, as well as many other PDFs or useful cards and things. But again, you don't strictly need them. As I said earlier, the dream is to use the original minis if you can find them, but you don't have to. Now, some armies are going to be more challenging to source minis for than others, but let's say you wanted to collect Space Marines. Firstborn Space Marine models can be picked up second-hand for a reasonable price due to how common they are. The plastics from 3rd edition onwards are useful since they aren't much bigger than the 2nd edition lines, and they are modular, which means they are easy to convert. A captain, for example, could be made by just giving a regular Marine some better war gear and a fancy tabard. The other thing is, you may already have models like these, built and painted. If you're as old as me, or have been in the hobby for a while, perhaps you have an old Firstborn army just languishing in the attic somewhere. Get them out again, and use them in a game. They may even be on 25mm bases, which was the correct size at the time. Or you may have parts in your bits box like I did. Maybe enough to smash together a small squad. Recently, I built this lot up and painted them as Dark Angels. It didn't take me that long, honestly. This one chap, for instance, is about half an hour to 45 minutes work. Dark Angels are quite an easy scheme to paint, you see, using simple speed painting techniques. I documented the process while I was painting, so if you'd like to see a video about how I painted him, then just let me know and I'll make it happen. The beauty of this edition, though, is that you don't need many models for a game. In my most recent 2000 points game, I had 28 models, but I could have used fewer in my list and it'd still be 2000 points. If you wanted to play a 500 point game, just to get the hang of things, a tactical squad of Space Marines and a couple of characters is all you need, really. This White Dwarf article, for instance, from issue 209, had an article giving additional rules for Space Marine armies, allowing combat squads of 5 Marines to be taken at half the points cost. As you can see, this leads to a nice little characterful force. Now, I know 3D printing is an option, it's just not one I know much about. So I shall say no more on this, except if you have access to a 3D printer, you've got a real asset there to get into 2nd edition. Maybe you and your opponent are fine with using Primaris Marines as proxies for old units, and that's fine. I guess templates won't cover them as well completely since their bases are larger. But if you're just trying the game out, what's the harm really? This isn't a competitive meta, and it doesn't have to be. If you and your buddy are having fun, surely that's all that matters. Finally, let me mention that the list building app Battlescribe has some modules for 2nd edition. I shall leave a link to these in the description. It can certainly make assembling an army on paper that much easier, and when it's time to take your list to a game, you can print it out with all the special rules for you there for ease of reference. Or just go from a file on your device. So there you go. Some tips on how to get into 40k 2nd edition in 2025, if that ripens your fruit. But is this an edition you play already? Maybe I've missed some key tips. If so, do leave them down in the comments below. And with that, I better go paint some more minis. Take care, and thanks for watching.